it's time for another Master Duel tier list with the new selection pack coming out, and we got a lot of decks to cover in this one. And if somehow I did not cover a deck that you wanted me to, just let me know in the comments. I'll answer. I'll leave a reply to you. But also, most of the time, if I left off a deck, it means I probably think it's only gonna be somewhere in like rogue or even lower than that. So don't get your hopes too much if you don't see your deck in here currently. But yeah, first off, some new cards is Horus. So Horus itself isn't really a deck. At least most of the usage from Horus will not be used as a deck by itself. It'll be used as an engine. That's you put it in basically any deck because it doesn't actually use your normal summon, and you can just use it to make rank 8s with. Like you can mill cards with Zombie Vampire. You can make a spell negate with Hope Harbinger. You can make a monster negate with the Photon rank 8. But yeah, other than that, it's not really a deck by itself, and it's just going to be splashed in most decks. Although, in my opinion, it's not going to be splashed in the best decks, in the tier 1 and the tier 2 decks. So it's more going to be used in like the lower tier 3 and rogue decks. So I'll just put it here so that to represent that you will see it, but you won't see it in necessarily the best decks. Memento. So I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about what Memento does, but I've been told that this pack doesn't even have all of the Memento support yet. It's still missing a few key cards, so it's really this deck is incomplete and it's not even that great. So if you're a fan of Memento, hold off on the pull this pack, get the cards, but maybe hold off on playing it until you get the rest of the support later. And Salamangreat. Okay, so Salamangreat would have been cool to get this for this to come out before all the Snake Eyes stuff, so that this would be like the most I guess hyped fire deck in the game. But funnily enough, Salamangreat is like one of the few fire decks that actually can't synergize with the Snake Eyes or a Diabolical engine, since most of the level 1 Sal monsters aren't particularly good. This Salamangreat now with the new support, it plays more like the other cyber spam decks, like Ignister and Mathmech. It puts up a huge board turn 1, and then it kills you on the follow up and all that stuff. The board now you can get to with Code of Soul. It's also being in the game. You get to a Raging Phoenix with both traps set. This is like the ideal setup, like the best setup you can get. Both traps set, which is like a Rage and a Roar, so you can get like a pop 4 plus an Omni Negate, plus you can relink your Pyro Phoenix on your opponent's turn, so you have another field wipe, so you have like double board nukes plus like an Omni Negate, plus your deck that you're a Cyber deck, so you run a hell of a lot of hand traps. So it's a lot closer to where the other Cyber decks are now, the other best Cyber decks. Is it the best Cyber deck out of like better than Agnister and better than Mathmech? That's to be determined. It's certainly better, but it's not like a tier 1 threat. It wasn't tier 1 when it came out, and that like OCG or Master, or no, not Master, in the TCG, and that was before they even got all the Snake Eyes cards. So now this is being released in the format with full power Snake Eyes. So it's not, it's not the best fire deck. We'll put it that way. What is the best fire deck though is the Snake Eyes. You could make the argument that Snake Eyes got, despite the most recent ban list where it's semi-limited, Wanted, and Ash, so it lost 2 stars, but you could argue that the deck actually got better because SP released, and this is one of the decks that makes IP probably easier than any other decks, and more often than every other deck. IP is part of every single one of your end boards, so IP into SP is just a stupid amount of disruption. You banish one from the IP, and then you can banish another monster later on. Like, what the hell is that? Also, Raging Phoenix came out, is the Salamangreat card, and that's it's better than Ambler Will, because now you can literally just OTK whenever. You You make a Zealantis, and then you just pop when Zealantis summons everything back. You summon back the princess. Whatever princess popped, the Raging Phoenix now comes back to and gains the attack of the monster you popped, which is it's like you literally can OTK at any given point now. It's kind of dumb, and like this is still gonna be the best deck, and it's partially because all the other contenders for like, or not really contenders for best deck, the next best decks feel like kind of bad to play in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, why don't we look at Purrely? Purrely actually, I think, has contention to be the second best deck in Master Duel, but only behind Snake Eyes, funnily enough. If you actually look at the in-game stats and Untapped GG's deck tracking stats, Purrely has basically performed at the status of the second best deck, only behind pure Snake Eyes for like the past month. And like it has some advantages. You know, Noir decks aren't as equipped to deal with Noir now because it was just introduced back in the format. So, you know, Noir is there. The Purrely Noir being introduced means that now you have basically a 100%, well, not 100%, but you have a really consistent way to get to Purrely Noir on turn 1 now, because now you have 3 Sleepy and 1 Delicious, so your My Friend is guaranteed to add you a good quick play spell to make Noir with. And just random cards like Purrely Stray Street, for example, is nuts. It turns off Imperm and Valor essentially, which are, you know, it's a lot of decks are playing hand shot right now, so you're shutting off 6 cards from your opponent's interaction on you, and it has other niche benefits, like if you're playing against Rescue Ace, or, you know, if you're playing Purrely, it's more like Rescue Ass, because your Stray Street turns off all their back rolls, so they're contained and they're extinguished. They can't target you, so that means their back row doesn't do shit on you, and then you can just do whatever you want on them. Well, I will say, as more and more good players actually realize that Purrely is a good deck, you might actually start seeing cards that weren't as common before but are good against Purrely see more play. You know, lesser played hand traps such as Crow and Droll, you might see an uptick in play to deal with Purrely. Crow especially, you crow the Purrely target in the grave, and then they don't get to make their Purrely Xyz from the Black Cat. That's huge. And, you know, Droll, if you don't deuce your stuff in the draw phase with your Purrely quick plays, then you can get punished that way. Also, you know, books are also good because you rely on the Purrely Eve trap card to make Noir instead of hard making Noir, since Delicious still at 1. That way, you know, stuff like Red Reboot and Book of Moon and all that stuff can always prevent the Purrely from hitting the field. So yeah, if this deck, you know, continues its good results, you will definitely probably see more people actually taking good cards against Purrely. Then we'll see how the deck really fares after people start playing cards like that. Because right now the only real way people are dealing with Noir in their deck building is like Snake Eyes running a one-off Curry that they search off, or decks randomly running Goddess. But like you're not seeing like Herald of the Abyss and stuff like that like you used to see when Purrely was the dominant deck months ago. Other decks, Labrynth. So Labrynth is also like, it feels so, I don't want to say mid, but it just feels underwhelming compared to Snake Eyes, especially if you're doing the standard furniture build where you're down to 2 pots, 1 Extrav, 1 Prosperity. You're down to 4 furnitures, so like the consistency is actually sometimes an issue. But you know, that because of that, it makes your other combo pieces that depend on Labrynth, you know, cards such as Arius or Transaction Roback, it makes those seem kind of just bad to run. Like Transaction Rollback is as much of a brick as it feels like it's as much of a brick as it is a starter sometimes. So it feels bad to play. Also, your interruptions your in-engine interruptions don't really do much, especially to like a Snake Eyes. Like they can easily play through a couple lovely pops, like that doesn't really matter too much. The better decks in the game, like Snake Eyes or Purrely or even something like Monodium, which is like a very combo heavy deck, they can all play through the average lab setup as long as there's no floodgate involved. So that might be more the direction where lab is headed to if you want to have success with it. Honestly, I feel like lab is being propped up a large amount just because of the fact that it has a great Rescue Ace matchup, because Rescue Ace isn't that great into backdoor decks, and you know, it's what are you gonna contain an Ariana? Like, oh no, anyways. So yeah. Speaking of Rescue Ace, so Rescue Ace as a deck, I just don't feel nice playing Rescue Ace as a deck, because it is a deck that runs so many bricks that, like, if you draw them, your hands get so much worse. Like when the Turbulence cards that you set, you don't want to draw any of the cards you set off Turbulence, because you're just minusing any time you draw into one of those, and you know the traps aren't even good to draw because you can't even use them. Or if you draw into your Popular that you have to run for your Bonfire, that also makes your Bonfires dead, but also makes you just lose an extender from your deck for free. Also, if you're still on the Auroradon package to make a Baron to protect your Turbulence, then you know there's another brick right there. Not to mention the engine requirements are so large that you're often running a plus, like close to, if not more than, a 50 card deck. So that also just hurts consistency in a way sometimes. There are definitely hands in Rescue Ace that just lose to one Ash, which is not where you want to be exactly, but yeah, Rescue Ace did get buffed this selection pack because of SP Little Knight, and I know SP Little Knight is technically a buff to literally every single deck in the game, but particularly it makes your turn 1 setting up your Turbulence a lot easier, because now you don't have to go through all the extra steps like making a proxy F Magician into a Mud Dragon to have targeting protection for your Turbulence, or you don't have to make a Sprite Elf that honestly just doesn't really do anything besides protect your Turbulence from Imperm. Now you just make an SP Little Knight to protect your Turbulence from Imperm. And if they Imperm preemptively, then you just turn those two into Promethean Princess, and Promethean Princess brings back the Turbulence, and you get the set 4 anyways. So yeah, it's nice. It makes the deck more streamlined. You know, and this is one of those decks that would play 2 SP most likely. So you know, if you are a Rescue Ace enjoyer, you just keep that in mind. But yeah, other than that, it's just sometimes this deck loses to itself more so than the other decks we've mentioned before. And I know, you know, against Purrely, if they put up the street, you're just in heaps of trouble. Another tier, like a deck in a similar tier, I would say, is like Branded Despia. So Branded kind of fell off. Not gonna lie, not necessarily because it's like it got worse or anything, just because people really stopped playing this, since it's a hand trap heavy format. So Branded always prefers like a more board breaker or less hand trap heavy format, especially the state of Branded and Master Duel, where there are so many hits where non-engine, like, or specifically board hand traps can actually just hurt you so much more, now that you can't really you only have one brand fusion, so drawing into it isn't realistic to play through getting Imperm on your Alibur, and like yeah, especially the deck building wise, Branded needs, speaking of needing lots of engine requirements like Rescue Ace, Branded needs a hell of a lot of engine requirements. If you want to get close to 40, you have to almost run like no non-engine, and then you're basically, when you go second in that case, you're playing into your opponent's boards, like full combo boards almost all the time, which is a hard ask to do for any deck. But if you want to play non-engine in your Branded deck, then you're gonna have to like go up to 50 or even 60 cards, and then considering the fact that your deck is already slightly inconsistent because there's so many hits on it, and then you reduce the consistency further, so to add in cards to help going second, you end up just losing to hand traps even more so, because now you just draw less engine and you have a bunch of board breakers. But it's like, well, if I can't play the game, then what do these board breakers really help me with, right? It's kind of odd. At least, the very least, Branded lost its worst matchup, or I should say Brandon's worst matchup at least got hit from the ban list, which is Superheavy Samurai. don't know if I want to drop it to tier 3 yet, just because Scarecrow is still legal. But man, speaking of like feeling like ass to play, the Superheavy Samurai is down to like what, less than 10 starters now, with only 1 Soul Piercer and 2 Legon. So like, you're a combo deck, right? But you only really have 9-ish good starters, and you can't run Call by the Grave or Crossout to insulate your plays. So how often are you just gonna lose to a single hand trap for Superheavy Samurai? Like, you either brick or you play a hand that loses to a single Ash. It really does not feel good to play. Like, I guess Soul Peacemaker technically gets you somewhere of a 1-card combo, but Soul Peacemaker by itself literally loses to every single hand trap in the entire game, which is, you know, usually the Superheavy Samurai, it has the advantage of playing is that conventional hand traps don't work on it when you hard draw Wakaushi or you hard draw a Soul Piercer, which, being at 1, you can't really do that much now. So it just feels, this isn't a great deck to, this doesn't feel great to play. So it's basically it. Yeah. Other decks that you could argue could be somewhere in this tier 2-ish region is, where is it? Okay, I'll put Vanquis Soul and Kashtira here because these are the 2 best shifter decks. Vanquis Soul is amazingly, like, imagine Vanquis Soul being the most consistent out of all the shifter decks, because you know, in the ban list, Kashtira lost yet another starter in Unicorn, so I don't know how it's got like the Superheavy Samurai problem of a single-digit amount of starters now. But at least you can play spell traps like Small World to up the consistency, whereas you can't really add more copies of stars to Superheavy Samurai. And you know, Shifter is still good, or Rise Star is still good, and yeah, VS is just, if VS plays the game and it can get Shifter, then yeah, that's probably where you want to be as a shifter deck, since you don't want to be like the classic shifter deck like Kashtira or Flu, where you shift your opponent, but you do that because your the other 4 cards in your hand don't let you play the game, so you end up still losing anyways. You don't want to lose the games where you shift your opponent. Those are your free wins. Vanquis Soul also, again, it can draw cards, so it can dig into shifter. It's an alright deck. Like, not really at the, none of these decks are really, I don't think you can argue these are really in the tier of Snake Eyes right now. Next we have, so Monodium. This is weird to place it to. I want to like put Monodium and Superheavy together. I don't know if Monodium is good enough to be in the tier 2 region yet, but I think right now we might finally reach the point where Monodium is a better wombo combo deck than Superheavy Samurai, just because Superheavy just keeps losing its starters. Meanwhile, Monodium is relatively, well, it's completely unhit, and it got SP Little Knight, and SP Little Knight just allows even more plays, and it gives you follow-up because you can banish your Astral Engrave to put it back with this later for next turn, so that you can use Astral again. So you have like more than 2 vicious Astrals in your deck. And Adignister, we'll put the Cybers decks here too. So Adignister, Mathmech, and I'll lump in the new Salamangreat now. These decks largely have like a similar playstyle, which is 1-card starters, 1 to 2 card starters, lots of non-engine, and build up and take like 5 minutes to summon out, to do their turn 1 play, to summon out a bunch of Cybers monsters that essentially just win you the game the majority of the time. It's just which flavor do you prefer? Do you prefer making a triple Firewall Dragon? Do you prefer Super Factorial plus double Firewall Dragon? Or do you prefer Cybers Prank Hits, double Field Nuke plus an Omni Negate? You know, it's really your flavor. Pick your flavor of end board. I think these are all relatively similar playstyle. They all lose to Maxi. They kind of lose. They don't really lose to Nips. Or yes, Salamangreat actually doesn't. You can play a version and a combo that doesn't lose to Nib, if you know, you know. But yeah, it's these. Funnily enough, these decks don't take advantage of SP as much as the other decks, so maybe that's a slight downside, I suppose. Yeah. Next, I guess we have Chimera here. So Chimera from the last pack. You have two choices on how to play Chimera. You can play Chimera branded with the Master Duel's heavily hit branded engine, or you can play Chimera Runick with Master Duel's heavily hit Runick engine. I don't believe we got the new illusion card in this pack either. Yeah, we didn't get Master Tell in this pack, so it's maybe when we get new illusion support, you can maybe consider moving this up. But right now, it's not really the best fusion deck you can be playing right now. I guess I should cover the other shifter decks. So Blue, Exo Sister, and okay, we'll talk about Hero a little bit, but these are just strictly worse shifter decks than the BS and Kashtira, in my opinion. Because Flu is like somehow Flu is less consistent than Kashtira, if you could imagine that. So that's not great. And then Exo Sister is like it loses to everything. It loses to one hand trap way too much. Like even Flu can occasionally play through a hand trap because it runs 3 quick play spell that just dodges impermanent Veiler. And like Exo Sister just getting your Exceeds hit by hand traps where you can't add the second monster. Like sometimes you can't even end on more than just one trap as a disruption, which is just not really sufficient if you don't draw it with shifter. And also going second, it's hard. Underrated part is that Flu Exo Sister, unlike the other shifter decks, these shifter decks can all play decently around Maxi or just completely ignore it, whereas Exo Sister gets absolutely shafted by Maxi. Yeah, Exo Sister, it doesn't even have the advantage of Flu. At least Flu is cheap, and if you own Flu already, you probably already have the deck, and it's like it's 3 URs. But Exo Sister is dead ass. It's as expensive, if not more expensive than Vanquis Soul and Kashtira for being worse. So yeah, if you don't already have Exo Sister, don't really bother unless you really like Michaelis, then be my guest. But it's not really worth the investment, in my opinion. And Heroes is another version of. I mean, you can consider it rogue because it makes Dark Law, but at the same time, Dark Law is just you can make Dark Law, but better in Kashtira. So I mean, if you own a hero deck, sure, go for a Dark Law, can win games, but a Rise Heart also wins games, and that's also legal in this format. So, here, okay, we'll do the. I'll put this stuff here. This is the Runick section. Okay, this is unchanged. Literally like every single tier list for the past 3 months right now. I've literally just been putting the Runick variants all together here near the bottom of Rogue, since we know the limitations of the Runick engine in Master Duel, but also the lack of space for non-engine, which is an issue when the best decks in the game run 15 plus non-engine and you can only muster up 9. You can't really conceivably stop your opponent turn 1, so that's a bit of an issue there. But yeah, so Naturia, Runick for hire, Earthbound, Runick Sprite, Runick Generator. You can put in Runick Plunder too, although I don't think I've seen a single Runick Plunder on Master Duel in my entire life. So apparently, theoretically that deck exists, but nobody on Master Duel plays it. I will say Runick Bistio got the biggest buff out of. Well, I mean, the other Runick decks didn't change at all because adding SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight actually does something. It does a lot more for Bistio Runick than the other Runick decks, since it banishes a card on summon, so you're guaranteed to trigger regain. An issue with Bistio Runick pre-SP was that sometimes if you don't open 2 Bistios, basically you can't trigger the draw off regain, so you're just losing a card for free. So now because SP exists, you can always trigger your regain now, so that's nice. Also, it gives you something to do with leftover bodies. Like if you have, say, a leftover Lubelia on the field and a random Runick monster that you use to trigger Fountain before, like you didn't couldn't really do anything with those two. Actually, nothing too much, or like nothing too important with those extra bodies. Now you can turn those two into an SP, recycle one of your extra deck monsters in your grave, and Runick SP Knight has amazing synergy with Brand and Regain, because you can when SP Knight uses its banish effect and you banish one of your opponent's light or dark monsters, instead of their monster returning, you can regain, put their monster back in the deck, and get rid of it permanently. So that's a really nice interaction. So yeah, SP Knight helps Bistio Runick a lot. Unfortunate part is that Bistios have gotten worse in the format. With the reintroduction of Purrely and Rescue Ace are just two decks that just do not care about Bistios, and they are a huge portion of the metagame. Combined, they're about as much as Snake Eyes, almost. So yeah, Bistios have gotten worse, and you know, who's to say? Maybe with Horus decks coming back up, you might, some of the decks that run Horus, not the Horus engines, not the Horus cards themselves, but like the engines, the decks that people want to run Horus in, like Tearlaments, for example, might get more popular. Then you might see Bistios as an uptick, but also Bistios aren't that good against Salamangreat, which is another new deck. So yeah. Okay, why don't we talk about these cards? So TG, Evil, Volcanic. These are Lyrless. Okay, I'm grouping these together. These are like the decks that splash the Snake Eyes engine. They're like Snake Eyes, except instead of running more hand traps, you're running like, either in the case of Evil Sword, you're like running a bit more bricks, or you're just running more engine cards from a slightly weaker engine instead of hand traps in your Snake Eyes build. Yeah, Lyrlix, one Snake Eye Ash is full Lyrless combo. For Evils, you're adding a bunch of bricks in your deck to add like 2 negates onto your end board, which, you know, doesn't really seem worth it in my opinion. Like, that doesn't seem like a good trade-off. But if you want to play Dinos, this is probably the best, most competitive way you're going to play Dinos in Master Duel, so it's alright. It's just worse Snake Eyes. TG's best Calamity locking deck in the game, for whatever that's worth. If that counts as something for you, it runs non-engine. It's just there's a really defined choke point, but people don't know it because nobody plays TG. It's the level 5 Dragonar Soul Charge. You wanna hand trap that one, but if people don't hand trap you correctly, then yeah, this deck performs pretty decently. But if for some reason you're playing against a TG enthusiast, watch out. They know where to hand trap you. Volcanic, it's like, this has maybe one thing over regular Snake Eyes, which is that if you get max seed, you can actually just kill your opponent. You just burn them to death. So you do have a better plan to max seed, but at the cost of running a lot more bricks in your deck and making your deck size larger, and also, you know, thus decreasing your chance of seeing your outs to maxi in the first place because you're running a bigger deck size. And Infernoble, I guess we'll put this in here too. I'll just put the Horus down here to represent that it's like a splashable engine, but it's not really a splashable engine in a bunch of decks. Infernoble, one of the highest win rate decks in the game when going first. Going second, it's a bit more variable, but yeah, I mean, how bad can a deck be if it just FTKs you going first majority of the time, right? As long as it avoids getting max seed. I guess then we should also discuss Dynamorphia, another deck that has a huge discrepancy between its win rate going first and going second. In fact, probably the biggest discrepancy out of any deck in the entire game. Like, I would not be surprised if the win rate of Dynamorphia going first is twice as much as it is going second. Because going first, it doesn't matter if you have Ash for their Frenzy or Ash for their Domain. They have 6 copies of cards that make Rexterm. They have 3 in-archetype searchable Solemn Strike. Like, they're always getting to Rexterm pretty much if they're going first. So it's a matter of, do you draw the out or not, and most decks don't run really sufficient outs to Rexterm. But going second, you know, it's a trap deck that has all the weaknesses of a trap deck. Oh, I guess I should put a Labrynth Sprite here. So Labrynth Sprite is still the best Sprite variant in my opinion. It did get a buff and from SP Little Knight, so now it's a Sprite is another deck that makes IP like nothing. So having IP into SP as an interaction is pretty decent. And other than that, it runs a ton of hand traps. It's one of those decks. It's probably runs the most hand traps in the entire game. Out of all the decks listed here, Labrynth Sprite probably has the room to run the most hand traps. So it has that going for it. Granted, it can't really run the Biru that well, unfortunately, because that conflicts with the Labrynth card. So, give or take, it's definitely all right now. You can definitely win games going first. Like your board is definitely way stronger going first now, just because of SP, and obviously you run 16 hand traps. So how your deck can't be terrible going second. I got to be at least decent going second, right? I guess we'll talk about the going second decks here. So, Mikanko and I put 8 axis in here because 8 axis actually benefits a lot from the Horus cards. How you're gonna fit an entire Horus engine into an 8 axis deck already that already goes over 40 cards. That'll be a problem for future me as I figure that out. But yeah, the Horus engine being just having free rank 8s in a rank 8 turbo deck, obviously it helps. You can make a Photon Lord to insulate against hand traps and your opponent's monster effects early on. You can make a Dingirsu into, and then overlay that into like a spider, and then you can break the board that way, again without using your normal summon. It's pretty decent. You can make advantage of discards. Discarding Gizmek is free. Discarding, let me check. Okay, so unfortunately the Horus cards do not trigger your danger cards because they have to be discarded and Horus cards send, so unfortunate there. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a buff to a going second deck. The issue is that this is a blind second deck, and blinding second when the best decks in the game put up, not only they put up like multiple interruptions, they also have guaranteed follow-up, and they make it almost impossible to actually OTK them, which then that means you're dead to their follow-up on the next turn. It's like, and then they run a bunch of non-engine on top of that. Like it's hell trying to go second. You have to board wipe them multiple times to have a clear shot to kill them. It's really, it makes going second quite difficult. Also, this is a deck that can actually run SP Little Knight. I know you might be thinking, but SP Little Knight prevents you from attacking directly, right? Well, you don't need to attack directly with 8 axis, and I guess saying this from Mikanko, you don't have to attack directly to kill your opponent through battle damage. 8 axis makes a Numeron Dragon, and as long as you have another Exceeds on the board besides the Draglugon that you used to make it, then you have a upwards of like 11,000 to 17,000 plus attack Numeron Dragon, and you don't need to attack directly to kill your opponent then. You can just attack any attack position monster. Boom. Same with Mikanko, right? Mikanko just crashes into your big dudes or the big kaijus that you give your opponent, and never has to attack directly to kill your opponent with battle damage. I'm putting Mikanko still as the better blind second deck over 8 axis because, as sad as this is to say, probably the best way to play Mikanko is as a going first build. Like the best way to play the blind second deck is to play it going first, potentially with floodgates and like with spear block and all that stuff. It's just, and going second is so hard. Like if like remember the last Duelist Cup, the one Mikango at top was a going first build. Yeah, they were onto something. Just play like every other deck. Like play like a floodgate deck that plays a bunch of towers instead of making it like a blind second deck. No comment. Stunned. I would say don't play it. It's like objectively this is not a good deck, but people are gonna play it, so Tearlaments. Okay, so I have something to say about Tearlaments. Okay, Tearlaments is a good deck. It's actually, popularity wise, it is the 5th most played deck in Master Duel somehow. It's just, I mean, yeah, we got a lot of Tear fanboys. The thing is, it's weird. The Cyan place weird to put Tearlaments. I could literally argue it for any position in Tier 2 or Tier 3, and you would have some kind of argument to place it there. People are excited to put Tier with the Horus engine. I might make another video on this, like explain the Horus engine with tier, but I will say this, that the Horus engine itself is not enough to boost tier, or it's not enough to boost Tearlaments tier up just for it existing. Like, you can make a zombie vampire to help mill an extra 4 cards if it goes through, like, cool, and spend 6 or 7 deck slots on that engine. Sure, it's not really. The zombie vampire doesn't even guarantee you get anywhere, like, unlike Kid Colors, because if you zombie vampire and you only mill 1 tier name, that 1 tier name doesn't even do anything besides let you make a mud dragon. Like, Kid Colors is so good because not only is it a mill 5 and an add 1, but also tier. Kid Colors itself already gives you a tier name, so when you mill another tier name like a Sharon or a Happiness, then you get to make a good tier fusion immediately. So yeah, I wouldn't say it got too much better with the addition of Horus cards, but I mean, it was pretty alright as is. It was just the meta is kind of weird, and if more people play stuff like Purrely is kind of a difficult matchup for tier, mainly because tier is a deck that has a weird amount of space for non-engine. Like, most tier builds people are playing don't really have room for non-engine at all, and that makes it really hard to interact with powers like monsters, and also makes it hard to interactive if you go second versus Snake Eyes without any non-engine. That's also an issue. Also, shifter decks are seeing an increase in play and stuff like that, which is obviously not what you want to see when you're playing tier. Yeah, it's a solid deck. I don't quite know where to put it. You could, again, literally you could put it anywhere here, and you would have some validity. Tri Brigade. Okay, so Tri Brigade's right. I guess I lump this in with yeah, I always put these two together because these are decks that run tons of non-engine with, like, these are the 2 best Sprite variants. So yeah, we'll put it there. It can also make. I'm not sure if Tri Brigade Sprite can make SP and IP into SP as often. No, what am I talking about? Yeah, this makes IP into SP. What am I saying? Of course, it makes IP into SP. The Endboard already has it, IP on it. So yeah, SP buff. Unchained. So I'm not gonna lie. I've been very disappointed with Unchained's performance. Like, it has severely underperformed since being released in Master Duel. I don't quite understand why. Like, I understand the OCG players don't like it, but even the TC players who do like and I want to represent Unchained, it hasn't performed that well in Master Duel. I don't know, man. Like, according to, like, the Untapped GG, it's like barely in the top 10 of most played decks, and its win rate isn't anything special. And on Master Duel meta, it shows that it hasn't really done that well in tournaments either, neither tournaments or ladder. So maybe the maxi tax is too much for it. I still think, like, on paper it seems fine. It's just, I don't know. It's been underperforming. If anyone that actually plays Unchained, give me insight on why, besides just further maxi, which I know is an issue, but you know, it's not the only deck here that I'll say that loses hard to maxi. Yeah, speaking of losing hard to maxi, it's Dragon Link. So Dragon Link, it got SP, it makes IP on the endboard. That's pretty much it. Unfortunately, as much as I enjoyed playing Dragon Link last format, now with Bestials got a lot worse because Purrely is back and Rescue Ace is his deck. So that's 2 of the top 5 most played decks now just don't care about Bestials, which obviously hurts Dragon Link's playability. Because I was just killing decks that actually were dying to Bestials before. Like, it's actually good against Snake Eyes. You hit the IP out of the grave, that you don't have to worry about IP for the entire game. It hits Brandon, Mathmech, Tier, Labrynth, all of that stuff. But yeah, now some of those decks have been seeing a decrease in play. Specifically, Mathmech and Branded, while they've basically their play rate has been replaced by Purrely and Rescue Ace. So yeah, Resonator. So Resonator, actually, one of the decks I want to mention, the pair with Horus, is one of the better decks with more synergy. With decks with most synergy with Horus, and the only success that Resonator has had in like the TCG has basically been when it was paired with the Horus engine, and you can make end on boards now with seals and IP through hand traps, which obviously goes into SP on your opponent's turn. Which then this is also a deck that plays the Bitchios and Regain, which I know the Bitchios are a little worse, so I can't say it's that much better than like Dragon Link, if at all. But again, the SP Regain interaction is strong, and yeah, it's just a solid way to play Resonator now. You don't have to force a Calamity. Yeah, I don't even think Resonator is Calamity locking anyway. It wasn't a good Calamity locking deck in the first place. So yeah, the Horus cards gives you more ways to play the Resonator instead of the straight up Synchro build. And straight up Synchro, huh? Sword Soul. I don't. The deck has not changed for formats for like 5, 6 formats in a row at all, unless you include the Superheavy Samurai build, which I don't even think is that good to run anymore because of the limitations. And yeah, this deck can't even really run SP. I suppose you could in theory run SP Little Knight, but it's not. You're not going to it as like your main form of play or as your main way to break board. It would be there as like a 15 extra deck card that you kind of can go into sometimes in very weird game states. But yeah, that's this format in a nutshell. In my opinion, again, let me know what you disagree with. I'm sure there's going to be a lot. Let me know any decks I missed. I'm sure there's quite a bit still. And in 2 to 3 weeks, when I'm completely wrong about this, come back and laugh at me in the comments. I would love to get shit on for my terrible takes. That's one thing I haven't gotten that much as a YouTuber yet, which is getting shit on for my terrible tastes, or for my terrible takes. Oh yeah, and I'm definitely going to be doing some videos on decks that changed from the selection pack. You know, maybe some more Monadium combos with SP, maybe more tier builds. You know damn well that I want to do Salamangreat and I want to do 8 axis with new Horus cards as well, but those are a lot of URs in those decks. So if I eventually get those URs, then I'll be on the lookout for those too.